Good morning and welcome to the Digital Security and Economic Recovery, Boosting Confidence and Productivity through a Security Design Technology session. The session today is organized by Geneva Dialogue on Responsible Behaviour in Cyberspace. My name is Jovan Kurbalija. I'm Director of DiploFoundation and Head of a Geneva Internet Platform. And over next 90 minutes, I will moderate the session and try to guide discussion in discovering new opportunities in advancing cybersecurity through the interplay between governments, companies, academia, and other actors. We're particularly honored today to have a really distinguished and highly competent panel, led first by a keynote address by Federal Councillor Ueli Maurer, Head of Federal Department of Finance, and four panelists representing companies and private sector actors which are indispensable partner of governments in the field of cybersecurity. We have with us Sabine Keller-Busse, member of the Group Executive Board of UBS Bank, Mr. Eugene Kaspersky, CEO and founder of Kaspersky Cybersecurity Company, Mr. Jeremy Thompson, Executive Vice President of Huawei Western Europe region, and Mr. Kasper Kling, Vice President of European Government of Affairs of Microsoft Corporation. Therefore, we have an excellent panel with us. And before I pass the floor to the Federal Councillor and our panelists, let me just provide you a few indications where we are today and what is the background for this discussion that we will have. Almost 1 year ago, federal government, Swiss federal government and DiploFoundation initiated dialogue, which included 15 sessions and quite in-depth discussion on the cybersecurity challenges. The dialogue was organized in response to the growing relevance of the question of cybersecurity for our society, for digital economy, and all aspects of our daily lives and routines. COVID-19 unfortunately came in February and March and further emphasized the relevance of cybersecurity and our dependence on digital technology and digital platforms. Therefore, what started as a general discussion of important issues on cybersecurity became extremely important and crucial over the last 8 months. In this discussion and dialogue, the representative of companies, technical community and academia have been developing better understanding of, in particular, cybersecurity by design and good practices in this field. As most of you know, there are quite a few initiatives globally on the norms, practices, confidence building, capacity building. And this initiative complements them, like Paris Talk, like Trust Discussion, Swiss Digital Initiative, which was initiated in Davos by the Federal Councillor. What is unique for the Geneva Dialogue is related to, I would say, two key words. One is neutrality of Switzerland and Geneva as venue where different actors can come together, exchange their views, build solutions, and move forward discussion. And second is trust. Trust is not in a great supply currently in the modern world and in cyberspace. And Switzerland, as a trusted partner by many governments, private companies, offered its expertise, venue, spaces, inputs, and overall context for this discussion. Therefore, over the last 12 months, we have developed enormous trust capacity with all actors involved in this process, and I will just mention a few of them. Bison, Sber Group, Cisco, Ensign Infosecurity, FireEye, Huawei, Kaspersky, Microsoft, Papua New Guinea ICT cluster, enormously important partners from small and developing countries. SIGPA, Siemens, Swiss Re, Tata Consultancy Services, UBS, WiseKey, and View Security, among others. As you can see, to neutrality and trust, we can add another keyword, which is inclusivity. There are actors from Europe, from the United States, China, India, and small island states. And with these three keywords, I would like to launch our discussion and to develop further insights based on the findings of the in-depth discussion among the partners and the paper which I'm sure you consulted with the practical advices what can be done in order to increase cybersecurity. Without further ado, it's my great honor and pleasure to invite Federal Councillor Ueli Maurer, head of the Federal Department of Finance of Switzerland, and pioneer in trying to promote that aspect of trustworthy internet by offering Swiss expertise, Swiss experience, and overall Swiss context for developing trustworthy internet. Mr. Maurer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The coronavirus had a big impact on the world economy. The latest OECD forecast expects that the global economic output will shrink by 4.5% this year. We believe the Swiss economy will do better than that, but most countries will come out of this crisis with a weaker economy and higher public debt. In this context, digital technologies present a great opportunity. We have seen their potential during the pandemic. Digital technologies have made our transition to a new reality easier, and they have made our economy and society stronger. Around the world, the coronavirus has made us realize the value of digital technologies. International efforts have focused on bringing the internet to more remote areas to allow more people to be online. What we have come to realize is that mobile networks and the growing Internet of Things could offer a boost to productivity and economic growth. But the digital transformation has to deal with increased cyber attacks as more and more people go online. Opportunities for crime increase. The potential of damage to critical infrastructure rises when billions of connected devices form part of the economy. Cyber attacks are already causing great harm to our economy. A study last year found the cyber attacks cost the Swiss economy about 200 million Swiss francs each year. Cybersecurity is therefore a precondition if we want to have benefits from the digital transformation. As a result, Switzerland is investing a lot of effort in more robust cybersecurity, both at home and internationally. To this effect, the Federal Council adopted a national strategy for the protection of Switzerland against cyber risk, as well as a digital foreign policy strategy. Both highlight the importance that Switzerland gives to cybersecurity and digitalization in our domestic and foreign policies. Switzerland's political stability, neutrality, lean regulation, and internationally leading universities offer the perfect environment to advance the digital transformation. I want Switzerland to become a global hub in the field of secure digital technologies. Trust, security, and innovation are the keywords. Against this background, the Swiss government decided yesterday to undertake efforts in order for Switzerland to become the leading hub for data security and data management. In Switzerland, the financial institutions coexist among a cluster of data storage and cybersecurity companies. This makes Switzerland an ideal location for fostering the trust in digital solutions and the security of them. Both the finance and technology sectors depend on the trust of customers and the security of their data. Trust and security are the basis of their business models and give our finance industry a global competitive advantage. Switzerland's leading role in the fields of finance and cybersecurity has been underlined by the Global Innovation Index, which named Switzerland the most innovative country in the world for the 10th time in a row. And 2 weeks ago, Switzerland also took the first place in this year's IMD World Talent Ranking. This competitive and dynamic setting provides an optimal basis for global initiatives such as the Geneva Dialogue and the Swiss Digital Initiative. The Swiss Digital Initiative was launched last year by the Swiss private sector. Its goal is to safeguard ethical standards in the digital world and to increase trust in digital technologies and in the actors of the digital transformation. The Geneva Dialogue complements international discussions on cybersecurity and stability. It brings together the practical experience of world-leading corporations from different sectors, coming up with secure digital products and services and maintaining them. As you can see, both initiatives take a multi-stakeholder approach and highlight the importance of Geneva as an international hub for defining the rules and norms of our digital future. Keeping to the Switzerland's tradition, the Geneva Dialogue has been developed as a bottom-up process that calls all stakeholders to find common solutions. I'm happy that we have the first results on this process, an outcome document of agreed definitions and best practices. They involve partners, agree that more work is needed to arrive at the standard that is easily used and applied globally. I therefore ask stakeholders around the world to follow and join the Geneva Dialogue. We need to intensify our efforts to make digital technologies more secure if we want to emerge stronger from this crisis. I look forward to hearing from some of the world's leading companies of digital products and services on how to build a more secure and responsible cyberspace for the benefit of our economies. I would like to thank all of the partners and especially our panelists for all their time and contributions during the Geneva Dialogue. I look forward to an interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Federal Councillor, we have a special sort of honor that today we can hear a few reflections from you, and I will take a few highlights from your keynote address, which could be very useful for our discussion. One is a clear link between internal and external security. Switzerland cannot be secure if its external environment is not secure. Second point, which you highlighted, is important of innovation for the development. And third point, which is extremely important, is a multi-stakeholder bottom-up approach. And those are three important inputs for our discussion. I would like to thank you once more for finding time to address us today. I can see that coffee is waiting for you. Therefore, that's really a great honor to have you this morning with us. And if I'm correct, Mr. Florian Schutz, the federal cybersecurity delegate, will be with us throughout the session for a discussion and addressing other issues. Now, with this excellent introduction and your highlight on the relevance of the financial sector and cybersecurity, we move into our panel discussion with our first speaker, Madame Sabine Keller-Busse, member of the group of executive board of UBS Bank. The floor is yours, Madame.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. And first of all, I'd really like to thank the organizers for this invitation and Federal Councillor Maurer for his keynote. And I fully agree with our finance minister's assessment, and in particular with his statement that cybersecurity is a precondition for benefiting from the digital transformation. And you will hear in a moment that innovation and resilience go hand in hand at UBS. The financial services industry continues to undergo significant change, and the ability to be agile and responsive to changing business environment is critical to success for us. And this was true before the spring already, but has been substantially reconfirmed and accelerated by the pandemic. And therefore, innovation and digitization are key strategic priorities for us to provide a really client-centric experience, and we invest heavily in those areas. We are spending approximately $3.5 billion per year. And everything we do needs to fulfill our main purpose. And the main purpose is making sure that we serve our clients in the right way, supporting and protecting our clients in achieving their financial goals. And technology will help us to be closer to the needs of each individual and creating more frequent and positive relationships, and by enabling us to develop products and improve quality of service. And we've heard the word before, trust. And this is what we are doing as well. We have trust as a fundamental key asset in mind. And quite notoriously, trust is something that is built over a long, long time, but can be lost in an instant. And moreover, trust has the potential to act as a key differentiator for financial institutions like us, but for our entire financial center. And on the one hand, we build this trust with secure products and services. Bank clients, accelerated by this global pandemic, are increasingly willing to go digital for their banking needs. And they are welcome this anytime, anywhere approach. We've seen it. Registrations for the UBS Twin, which is the payment solution, doubled during the pandemic. And client onboarding via our UBS Welcome app was even up 70% during the peak. And during the first COVID wave, which was kind of March to May, we saw the usage of digital banking substantially increase. The logins were up 25%. And in the third quarter now, about 2/3 of our personal banking clients and around even 80% of our institutional clients are really using the digital banking offering. So what we have seen is since then that all these client interaction has actually remained on these elevated levels, which is confirming the longer term trend to go digital. And clients expect that digital interactions are secure and that digital value is protected. And exactly this is where cybersecurity comes in. And we build trust through secure and resilient operations. And I think the financial sector has really shown during the pandemic a very high degree of operational resilience, as we have continued to serve our customers and the wider economy. We were able to serve our clients without disruption and enabled up to 95% of our employees to work from home without significant impact. And this seamless shift to work from home took place during the historical, really busiest period on global capital markets. We saw trade volumes in the spring in some asset classes being multiple times higher than during any other busy periods. At UBS, we were able to manage this peak of stress and without exposing any of our clients or the firm for significant risks. And I think finally, we build trust as well by supporting our clients when they need us most. And that is again enabled by digital technologies. And what we have seen is that our investments into technology and infrastructure have really continued to be critical in successfully operating through the COVID-19 pandemic. And to give you a very, I would say, recent example, under the program established by the Swiss Federal Council in March this year to support particularly small and mid-sized companies, UBS has provided 24,000 loans amounting to 3.3 billion Swiss francs in a very short time period. And that was possible because within 3 days, our teams have built 6 bots to process emergency credit lines, we would have had to ramp up 300 FTE if we hadn't done these bots, or we would have taken a lot more time to help these companies. So overall, increased automation, what we are seeing, we have over 2,000 bots already running, which was a main contributor to our ability to serve our clients throughout the pandemic. So in summary, banks like UBS are shaping this transition to secure digital products in support of the economic recovery. And with this, back to you, Jovan.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Keller-Busse. For first, I'm additionally reassured as one of the users of the UBS services that I'm in the my funds are in secure hands. Thank you for from the personal perspective. But on more general perspective, what we are discussing today, you highlighted a few important points: relevance of trust, importance of small and medium enterprises, and high relevance of the cyber infrastructure as a critical infrastructure of our society, which is then influenced by in different sectors, including in particular financial sectors, which you really comprehensively and eloquently outlined in introductory statement. Now, this element of critical infrastructure brings us to our next speaker, Eugene Kaspersky, the founding director, executive chairman of the Kaspersky Group. Eugene has been participated in quite a few activities that we had sessions on high-level panel during Internet Governance Forum, and I know he can speak on the wide range of topics from the history of the Internet to the question that we'll discuss today. What is the current situation? Eugene, you and your company are in the trenches of the cybersecurity battles. What is the current situation? What you can bring to our discussion from those trenches with regard to exploiting vulnerable products to the question of overall cyber security? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jovan, and hello, everybody. Well, actually, speaking globally about the situation, I will say that we are living in times when the ages are changing. Well, we were living as Homo sapiens, we were living in a Stone Age, then Bronze, Iron Age. Some people say that now we are living in a Plastic Age because plastic is the most important material right now. And I guess now we're turning to the Cyber Age. The age then the cyber technologies and data will be the most important materials which we have. Actually, that's we're still not in cyber because we're still learning how to change our life, how to change the world with the cyber technologies. But I believe that in the future will be much more cyber around us, around our individual life, about our businesses, enterprises, the industrial sector, production, everything. The problem is that the cyber will be around us as I'd like to compare that with electricity. There are 150 years ago, then the first electric lamps invented, then the first power lines were made. Actually, we will not, the humans will not understand how the electricity will change the life. Now the electric power is everywhere around us, in all the kinds of all the system around us. In batteries in our pocket, in our smartphone, in our computer, in actually everywhere. So the cyber will do exactly the same. So it will get to any part of our life. And the problem is that the technologies which we are doing right now, which we use in the not just computers, smartphones, but the Internet of Things, the industrial system, the infrastructure, unfortunately, they are vulnerable, and it's very hard to convert them to the secure by design because well, actually there are no standards, there are no regulation, and we are living in a world which is developing more and more cyber systems. At the same time, there are 10,000, 100,000 of hackers, of the bad guys, of the cyber criminals ready to attack the systems, and at the same time, the competition means that we have to develop the enterprises, the companies, they have to develop their new products faster and cheaper. So in many cases, they think about security when the product is ready. So first of all, they have to deploy product to the market, and then they're facing the security problems, and they need to change the product to protect the product with security. Well, actually, the security, we are able to handle the situation with computers and smartphones. We are ready to provide you security. I'm speaking for the security industry. We are ready to provide you with security products and technologies for computers, for the smartphones. But don't ask us to develop the antivirus products for fridges, vacuum cleaners, coffee machines, any kind of other IoT devices. It's simply, well, technically it's possible, but it's not possible to use it. So the major problem which I see is there is a lack of regulation, because we need to have the standards for Internet of Things, for industrial systems. Leave computers alone and smartphones. Well, we will able to handle that as a security industry, but we will fail to secure all the rest of the Internet of Things, industrial systems, and infrastructure. We need to develop and introduce the standards for infrastructure, especially for critical infrastructure. There are good steps in this direction. So at least there are definitions of critical infrastructure. They are documents of or some standards of this kind of the systems. But the next step, I guess, is the regulation standards for IT industry, the standards of developing these systems, and the right way, and which I will 100% support, is to introduce this secure by design standards. Thank you.
Eugene, thank you for placing our discussion in wider historical context, bringing us some good news and some bad news. Good news is that you can provide security for our traditional devices. Bad news, or not necessarily bad news, but challenging news, is that it will be much more complex and difficult to secure various Internet of Things, from refrigerator, Hoovers, and growing numbers of Internet of Things. And you also highlighted that we need the standards, technical standards for security by design, and some regulation in order to create the regulatory and standardization context. Great inputs, and I'm sure that in our discussion, both in chat discussion, which is becoming very, very lively, later on we'll make a summary and discussion with our panelists, we can come to these important points of regulation and standardization. Now, with this question of regulation, we're moving to, I guess, London, from Moscow to London, to hear from Jeremy Thompson from Huawei on this interplay of insecure products with fragmented regulatory market, and how it can impact the economy, what are the risks, and what we can do about it to address this issue, which was highlighted by Eugene and our study as well. Jeremy, over to you.
Many thanks for inviting Huawei to this event today. I'm going to pick up on Eugene's comments, and actually I have three things to say. The first one is actually about global standards. Our industry, the telecoms industry, relies hugely on the role of global standards. And it didn't seem very long ago that if we were traveling globally, we may have to take 2, possibly even 3 mobile phones with us, because there were different systems around the globe. But with 4G, all those standards, global standards, came together. And whilst that might benefit global travelers, the real benefit is through having the economies of scale, so that one product can be made by multiple companies, which would then service a global market. And that's what's enabled sort of relatively low price points and growth in the telecommunications industry and the wireless industry. I guess the bad news at the moment is that we risk the bifurcation of these standards due to political influence, and that would have a big impact on the adoption of technology and the opportunities for growth. So the importance of standards and global standards and keeping global standards is fundamentally central to growth in many technology fields. And in fact, we have some of our standards teams based in Switzerland. By definition, they work on a global basis, but because of the geography of Switzerland, but also the neutrality, trust, and inclusivity, we feel that's a good place to have some of our global standards teams to be located. The second point I want to make is the role of government. And again, this picks up on Eugene's point. There is going to be many devices connected to the internet, not just computers and phones. And we're seeing government probably built by the confidence of the positive impact that GDPR has had on privacy. Governments like the European Union implementing the toolbox, in Germany in common capabilities, in the UK, definition of the Internet of Things protocols, things like passwords. So there is a role for government to improve and define what the security standards should be, so that industry can build to those standards, and that is raising the bar for security. The third point I want to make is to do with reducing the barriers to entry, encouraging innovation, and developing the ecosystem that's going to enable more players and more customers enjoy the benefit of a secure technology environment. And we're seeing the growing in countries and regions of test centers. So there's one in Germany, we have a couple in the UK, we have one in Brussels, and I believe in Canton Zug in Germany, in Switzerland, there is a center for testing new products as they come into the market before they're launched onto the live network. And we see that as a really important aspect of growth, so that small innovative companies can test their products in a secure environment before they're launched onto the wider public. So those are three things that I would like to introduce. There is the fourth, but I'm sure we're going to talk about that later on, to do with research and development and how important continuous research and development is for growth and adoption. But by way of introduction, I'll introduce those 3 points.
Great, thank you, Jeremy, for bringing on this line of thinking that we have from the keynote address, from a perspective from financial sector by Sabine, then Eugene with from the trenches of cybersecurity battles, and highlighting this importance of the common standards, the regulation, building of trust. And I think it's nice introduction for our next speaker, Mr. Kasper Kling, Vice President of European Government Affairs in Microsoft Corporation. As you can see behind me and the background are the UN flags at UN in Geneva. And Kasper was a part of our diplomatic circle till, let's say, 6 months ago when he joined Microsoft. And he is now in a way embodiment and of this interplay between government sector, diplomatic sector. He was one of the first, he was the first Danish tech envoy to Silicon Valley, to the question of the private sector. And that bridge which Microsoft is trying to make between diplomacy and business and private sector is extremely interesting. Kasper, it's great to see you again. And please let us know what you can add to this thread of discussion. Over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Jovan, and it's great to see you again. And I might actually begin by saying that the work that you did together with the UN SecGen's high-level panel on digital cooperation, I think, was enormously important. So kudos to you and all your colleagues who took this forward. Listen, I think most of my fellow panelists have said, a lot of important things, and I'll pick up on a couple of them along the way, and actually end up where I think the Geneva Dialogue, what role it plays and why it is important that we have these discussions. But just to sort of use myself as an example, the 29th of June 2017 was a pretty decisive moment for my own understanding of what this is, because I was, as you mentioned, I had a previous life before Microsoft where I was serving in the Danish Foreign Ministry. I was ambassador to Indonesia back in 2017 when NotPetya hit. And I'll be very honest in saying that I hadn't fully comprehended, the importance of cybersecurity and how damaging cyber attacks could be. But we had a very big Danish company in the shipping area that was hit very hard by NotPetya. And, we were trying to help from the embassy side, because what happened was, in a matter of just hours, their whole digital infrastructure system was basically taken out. And with ships arriving in the port of Jakarta, literally, this company could not tell the authorities what was in individual containers they wanted to offload in the port. So we had to come in and step and get specific permissions for this company to unload thousands of containers over a couple of weeks because of the cyber attacks that hit them. And I think, for me, that was really, as I said, an eye-opener in understanding that cybersecurity is not just a theoretical thing; it's something that has a real and very concrete damaging effect, in this case on a private company, but as we've seen in the years since then, on everything from our critical infrastructure to individuals using the various platforms and the various digital technologies that we have. And I think if we fast forward to 2020, as many others have mentioned, we've just been through, we're not through yet, but we've been through some very difficult months with COVID-19. And when you're sitting in Microsoft, it's sort of a very mixed bag when you look at what has happened, because in one area, we've seen the enormous dependency on digital platforms. Had it not been for, in this case, Zoom or for Teams, we wouldn't have been able to meet today and have this discussion. That wouldn't have been possible, 5-10 years before. And in many ways, I think our ability to cope and mitigate a global pandemic like the one we're in the middle of would have been much more difficult had we not had access to 21st century technology. So we've seen a massive acceleration of digitalization across the world, but certainly also in Europe. But we've also seen, which I think is an important part of this, two aspects. One is the digital divide. That's existing on a global scale, but it's also existing even within Europe. Those who have access to broadband, the latest technology, have in general done much better during the global pandemic than those who have not had access. It's a very important part. I think we all have responsibilities for trying to fix. The other side, which is of course today's topic, is that the flip side of the coin with this accelerated digitalization is that unfortunately those individuals and those actors that do not wish us well, they have additional possibilities for attacking the vulnerabilities that comes with digitalization. And we have seen that even in the last couple of months. If we look in the last few weeks, we have identified an attack from a specific state actor trying to target 7 companies dealing with vaccine development or indeed with treatment of COVID-19. So I think we are sort of in a slightly schizophrenic moment where we see the benefits of digitalization, we see the necessity of everybody coming online, and again, we're probably not through the pandemic yet, unfortunately, although we have a bit of light at the end of the tunnel now. But we have to make sure that we at the same time focus on mitigating the threats that are coming from those actors that are not acting in a responsible way. And then I want to actually say why I think the Geneva Dialogue is so unbelievably important, because it really brings together different stakeholders, as you mentioned at the beginning, Jovan. And I think this is in many ways the reality of the 21st century, or the cyber age, as Eugene I think called it, or on the verge of the cyber age, I think you mentioned, is that in today's world, governments cannot do it alone, the private sector cannot do it alone, I would add civil society. We really have to create formats for bringing all stakeholders together to try and fight back on the threats to our societies, and I would say actually the foundation for our democracies and our markets, our private companies. As a company, we take that responsibility very seriously. We're trying to make sure that our products have security by default. We're focusing a lot on having resources allocated to make sure that we help our customers across the world defend themselves against cyber attacks. Just to throw a couple of numbers at you, I mean, we have more than 3,000 people working just on cybersecurity issues, trying to increase the protection of our customers. And in 2019, we actually stopped more than 13 billion ransomware emails that was trying to penetrate either individuals, state actors, or companies. So it says a little bit about the magnitude of the problems that we are in front of. Let me try and wrap up with a little bit of good news, and then perhaps a little bit of bad news or challenging news, as I think you mentioned, Jovan. I think the good news is that when I compare the situation to even 3 years ago, we have a much more mature dialogue. I think we have much more attention around the necessity of focus on cybersecurity. I represented a country, but we have many countries now that are taking this as seriously as you would traditional risks in the security space, and I think that's good news. We have UN processes that are ongoing with the GGE and the open-ended working group that are discussing sort of the traffic rules, if you like, of responsible behavior in cyberspace. We have a number of multi-stakeholder forums. Just a few weeks ago, we had the Paris Peace Forum that, of course, was part of the Paris Call that we supported from day one, bringing together a multitude of stakeholders to promote responsible behavior and trust in cyberspace. Very positive. Without trust, digitalization cannot take place, and we have a shared responsibility for doing that. I think the challenging news, and I realize it's terrible to end up on a slightly more pessimistic note, but I think the challenge is that this is to some extent a modern arms race, where all of us are trying to do our utmost using the latest technology to defend our customers, governments across the world. Unfortunately, malign actors are also doing everything they can to step up. And what we've seen also inside Microsoft in the last couple of months is that the degree of sophistication in the attacks have gone up. I think the irresponsibility has also gone up. We've seen, as I mentioned before, specific attacks on our healthcare providers, even during a global pandemic. I think it says a little bit about the enemies, if you like, of sort of a trustworthy and stable and secure cyberspace. So this is not over. We will have to continue investing, but I do think that having these discussions, bringing together the different stakeholders, is a very good first step. So it's a pleasure to be with you today. And with these words, thanks very much, Jovan.
Thank you, Kasper, for this really interesting and comprehensive survey of interplay between governments or diplomacy and private sector. And it is great to have you as one of the key person in reducing lost in translation between different communities. And this is probably one of the major challenges. And the more cyber is becoming holistic and comprehensive, the more need for the boundary spanners between diplomacy, cybersecurity, financial sector, cyber technical community, the need for the boundary spanners will be enormous. And thank you also for bringing a positive note. We often see glass half as it is currently, half empty, but we forget that quite a few things have been done on the international level. You mentioned the UNGG, UN Government Group of Experts, open-ended working group as a very interesting experiment in opening previously closed cybersecurity field to actors from academia, civil society, technical community, and businesses. Therefore, this is the excellent summary. And before we move to the second iteration of the comments, based on your reflections on discussions so far, I would like to invite Vlada and Marilia. I don't know who is available now. My colleague Vlada Radunović and Marilia Maciel, who are following a very dynamic text chat to tell us what is going on in text chat. Vlada, over to you.
Thank you, Jovan. I'll take this round. It was quite interesting. Some interesting exchanges. We started with the exchange, but I'll get that question later in discussion, if you agree, on the global cooperation possibilities of the IGF, of eventual global digital organization, and so on. We can get back to that. But in this part of discussion, what was quite interesting was a reflection on a Swiss role as a digital leader, which might, according to Serge and some others, actually require more of the internal in Swiss treatment of sensitive issues and balance between surveillance and privacy. And then also well, more balanced treatment of Swiss versus foreign companies with regards to legal requirements. There was some kind of agreements that there is a need generally to align different stakeholders, including law enforcement, as well as Europol, Interpol, not only the net, with private sector, civil society, even produce some sort of a digital strategy, well, particularly in Switzerland. There was a reflection from Austria that we shouldn't go into, when it comes to regulatory frameworks, into blocking the encryption. And that's a good question of to what extent the regulatory pressures can actually lead to more insecurity of devices, and the companies, how would the companies play with that? One suggestion was from Harry that we should turn more to the open protocols and standards instead of everyone creating their own protocols, which can make products less secure. And a good suggestion of certification schemes such as the EU and pushing more towards security by default, particularly in the times of connected devices. Simon mentioned that there are a lack of capabilities to quantify risks based on likelihood and impact of security vulnerabilities. And there were three particular questions which I will read. One is from Margaret from Africa. She's representing the PRIDA project, and she mentioned the awareness, particularly in Africa, that there is a lack of awareness of majority of people related to vulnerabilities of connected devices and so on. So her question is, who should take the primary role in creating this awareness? Should it be operators, service providers, government, civil society, academia, and what are some of the modalities used? Then the second question is from Jiamin. I apologize if I don't pronounce it well. Reflecting on the Cloud Act, GDPR, and regulations that exist, how does that impact cooperation on international level, also between the companies and governments, and how different companies balance Cloud Act requirements, GDPR requirements to provide information and still keep the security of the services? And there was one particular question for Mr. Kaspersky, but I guess everyone can reflect. How would you go about securing IoT devices of attacks, since many are insecure and being used increasingly for botnets and expanding other attacks? We can get back to more questions later on. Jovan, back to you.
Thank you, Vlada. We also just got an input from Christiane Roy from Permanent Mission of Canada about the new initiative of Canada and few countries, which is called Let's Talk Cyber, to supplement discussion on the open-ended working group. And this is another element which adds to Kasper's view that the glass is half full. Therefore, there are initiatives bottom up by governments, private sector, and academia, and other actors. And we have currently approximately 160 participants in our session, with almost half and half here in the Zoom room and half in streaming at YouTube. I would like to invite our participants to make active as a part in the text chat, but we now move back to the panel. You panelists, you are welcome to pick up on any question and point which was raised in discussion so far, but there are a few questions that we thought could be useful. For Sabine, for you, the digital transformation holds enormous potential for the financial sector. That's clear. How does UBS foster the digital transformation in this interplay between innovation and resilience, which was already mentioned also by Federal Councillor as a key challenge? What would be your reflection on this or any other issue or point that was raised in discussion that you find pertinent and relevant? Over to you.
I think a lot of I would say everything that has been said is of utmost relevance to us. And one thing I want to pick up is particularly, Eugene, you mentioned it, was Costa as well, was the mentioning of critical services. And UBS is a systemically relevant bank. We're even one of the 7 global GSIFs. So I think I can consider all our infrastructure as being utmost critical. And this is why the space of cyber prevention and resilience is of this utmost importance to us, not only for our clients, but even being part, as I said, of this global network of systemically relevant banks. At the same point in time, we've heard, and I've alluded to that earlier on, that pandemic has pushed the digitization. Digitalization is just kind of a step changed in our client bases, and that is something obviously, rightly as you pointed out, we are somewhere between, you know, innovation and being resilient and making sure that we can operate in a resilient way. And so, in a way, we are absolutely at a point where we just need to marry innovation and resilience, and this is what we have been done over the last few years, and this is what we will continue to do, obviously. So what we are doing is absolutely we need to ensure client experience as well, but as I said, stability. And to achieve this, it's really important investing as well in security, in technology. We heard a couple of questions. How do we deal with the cloud egg? Obviously, we have moved large part of the infrastructure to the cloud, but again, technology helps us protect the safety and privacy of our clients because you can use encryption tools, etc. So overall, what we have seen through COVID, again, and that was important to us as well when it comes to resilience, because I think this was the utmost litmus test to the industry. We were able to operate at 99.999% of availability. And at the same point of time, we have even implemented more IT changes driving innovation as in the prior years. And it was important because during COVID, and you heard it, that we had even threat actors who used the pandemic in order to test the systems. So resilience is really something which is extremely close to us. And we need to really defend ourselves with a vast array of internal and as well as external capabilities. And we heard a lot about global standards, and for us, it's really important to get that alignment. But in the end, I would say to us in the cyberspace, it's just boiling down to 5 functionalities. You know, analyzing the threat, protecting, detecting, responding, and recover. And I think the better we can work across public and private sectors, the more effective we obviously are. And we are really, I would say, acutely aware of this, as I said, but at the same point of time, that's more the fun part of the equation of being in the bank is the huge push on innovation. So we are at the same point in time, we are forced to innovate. Give you some examples. In the US, we are currently collaborating with a fintech and developing an entirely new platform, baking in latest technology. We're working with Broadridge, and we are really building this modern workstation where everything is integrated, have a hugely scalable back office. Another example where we are investing into innovation is what we call our MacDP. It's kind of, we are building the Airbnb of data, where we're leveraging data standards. We're working with the Azure cloud, and really with this providing a platform for fast and accurate finance and risk data sharing. And actually moving to the cloud as well, in particular to the public cloud, one of the reasons, and we heard Kasper providing some background, is that we can benefit from this huge investments that the cloud providers are making into their infrastructure, keeping us safe. But we're doing more on the innovative side as well, without sort of getting focus away from resilience, because we're doing a lot through the ecosystem of fintechs. So each year we're doing this Future of Finance challenge, where we are sort of inviting startups, established or growing companies, participating and helping us understand what is the way finance works, how the changes will be. And through this, we have been able to adopt a couple of really cool ideas from artificial intelligence, quantum processing, or smart contracting. And that is something where we get a lot of input as well. And even earlier this year, we've just launched UBS Next. And that is a $200 million portfolio, which is really targeting specific strategic innovations in early stage fintech or tech companies. And that's our vision, that we are building strong partnerships across the ecosystem and thus incubate innovative and cutting edge technology. And this will then drive the future of banking and really help us sort of developing disruptive business models, and at the same point in time working across our whole UBS tech estate. And I think that just demonstrates that in our industry, as I said, a systemically relevant bank protecting a critical infrastructure, making sure that our clients can bank safely, that we are protecting their privacy, their data, whatever, is so important that we balance those two aspects in a very, very meaningful way. And I really do think that through this one, we will be able to really contribute again to this economic recovery and continue as in the banking service to really play this critical role.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Thank you, Sabine, for highlighting this. Quite a few aspects practical from the UBS experience, and also there is a resonating element of need for standardization, need for some sort of harmonization of the rules, which will reduce compliance cost, which will make the system more interoperable. Before we move to other panelists to comment on the question, I would like to invite Serge Drozd from the first is network of CERTs, computer emergency response centers, and also from one small company, Proton Mail. Serge, what would be your short input from these two perspectives on our discussion, in particular in this question of standardization, harmonization, cooperation? Over to you.
Thank you, Jovan. Yes, my name is Serge Drozd. I'm the chair of the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams, which brings together all the security teams from around the world. I think security is a word we use a lot, but what I feel is important too is what's been mentioned here a lot is trust. And trust is more than just about security. Trust is about actually being able to work together, and it's not a technological thing, it's a human thing. Trust is not something that machines do. Trust is something that humans have among each other. And I think it's very, very important that we create an environment in which internet users actually trust each other and trust all the stakeholders. For me, that means all these stakeholders need to be around the table, kind of on eye level, discussing their concerns and their needs. And eye level means it's neither top down nor bottom up. It really means eye level. At the end of the day, it essentially means that we need to make sure that the human rights are respected in the internet, so that all the participants can kind of win, because I don't believe that it's just going to be the private sector or the states that are going to win. It really has to be win-win. So that's just my short input. Thanks.
Great, Serge, great for enriching our discussion with human rights perspective, especially I would say in standardization, harmonization processes. And it's great to hear from one of the person who is also in trenches of cybersecurity with CERTs, and now small startup company, which is becoming bigger and bigger, Proton Mail. Thank you for that reflection. We go back to our panelists, and Eugene, quite a few questions landed on your desk on the question of the vulnerabilities of the supply chain. Why is it technically difficult to certify technology as a whole to address digital risk? That line of thinking, in particular on side of the standardization and the common global action to make more secure cyberspace. What would be your take on it? Over to you, Eugene.
Thank you for the question. Actually, you are absolutely right. The supply chain is one of the factors of high risk, especially for the high-tech companies, which assemble the goods from the different parts, from different components. Speaking about the Huawei, the company which is able to assemble the systems, their products from the components they produce themselves, but many other smartphone, for example, companies or network equipment companies, the automotive, transportation company, well, many companies, they just develop the goods from the companies which are provided by the trusted companies. But anyway, these technologies they use, the quality of these technologies sometimes they could be questionable, they're vulnerable, and actually this is really the very, very important problem. And I see only the two ways how to fix the problem. First of all, to use architecture secure by design, and we have the prototypes of the systems which are assembled from non-trusted components, but the system itself is trusted. And in short, we simply run the components from the different providers, from the different supply chains and every part of this, every component works in a isolated environment and with a prescribed behavior. So actually, we've just we developed the rules for every component. So we run an isolated environment under the strict control. This is the technical way how to solve the problem. And the second way, of course, it's standardization of development, which was speaking in my first comments, to introduce the rules for IT sector to develop the technologies, to develop the products which are used, which they provide to other companies. Is it possible? I guess it is. For example, we have the standards and we have the regulation for buildings development. Well, so we're now in buildings. So there are rules, the laws, there are penalties if they don't follow, the engineers don't follow, workers and engineers if they don't follow this regulation. So I guess now it's time to do the same for IT. Why don't we have it for IT right now? And simply because the IT industry is too young. Their buildings development, we have Homo sapiens have thousands of years of the history. That's why we know how to do that and we know how not to do that. With IT, it's a very fastly developed industry. So still we don't have the regulation and maybe for some areas of IT industry, we don't really need this regulation. But for Internet of Things and infrastructure and for supply chain, we definitely need to have more strict regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. And you pointed to different speeds of technological development and standardization regulatory. I hope we can accelerate a bit, especially in these critical areas of critical infrastructure, the cooperation and the standardization in this field. We have with us the Florian Schutz, cybersecurity delegate and informally cybersecurity Tsar of Switzerland. I know that with the modest lingo in Switzerland, it's probably something which Florian may criticize me of indicating it, but he is a person who is basically coordinating cybersecurity efforts. Florian, you have been following, thank you for stepping in the name of the Federal Chancellor. What would be your quick reflection on this thread of discussion? And you, unlike Kasper, who came from diplomacy into private sector, you were in private sector and you moved to the government position. Over to you.
That's correct. Thank you very much. And I would never dare to criticize you. So thank you for having me. It's a huge honor to briefly reflect on what was in the discussion. I would like to take up a couple of points. One is product security was mentioned. And there was a lot of stress on regulation. And while I do think in certain areas we will need some regulation, A, to ensure a certain minimal standard, and B, also to make the market the same for basically every participant and ensure that competition exists and it's not a winner takes it all market. I also would like to call upon you to be very, very careful with over-regulating, because regulation can actually hinder innovation. It's very hard to foresee what technologies we have in 5 or 10 years. If you remember, the iPhone was introduced in 2007 and it basically revolutionized how we use mobile devices today. No one has foreseen that using, our all-time loved old Nokia phone, for example. So we need to be careful there and we need to have a good balance. The second one is really also the focus on building secure products. It is very, very important, and in my opinion, often overlooked today, that the attack defense game, that's a cat and mouse game. And I think we understand it so far, and we're not terribly bad at it, but we're still not very good at developing products that actually have a high standard of quality, and security is an aspect of quality. And I know this is hard, especially for embedded devices. The time to market needs to be fast. Actually, the margins are very, very low. They're in the couple percentages range, but nevertheless, you need to put out a product that you potentially never see again. And I think that's one of the challenges that we need to take up, and where we need to develop frameworks and actually conditions within markets that this security can be built in. Another point I would like to take up, and it was mentioned, is especially on the responsibility. So I think it is of utmost importance that also the players in the market, and I'm sure every one of you agrees on that, otherwise you wouldn't be here, takes over the responsibility for the services and products they offer. And it was mentioned that privacy is, of course, very, very important. We as Switzerland, we know very well, especially with Geneva, where we have a lot of NGOs that sometimes are in the focus of others that do want to harm, that do want to steal their data. So that protection is very, very important. And if you offer a service that actually helps protecting communication and data, you also need to be aware that potential maldoers might use that service, and sometimes they do. And there it's your responsibility as well to ensure that your service is used in an ethical way. And I think it is our responsibility from a government side to actually collaborate with you to make this possible for every one of us, that we ensure that cyberspace is used in an ethical and responsible way and serves those that want to use it for the greater good, and disencourage those that actually want to do harm. And I would like to close my remarks with another very important point, and it was briefly mentioned, is especially the talents that we need. So I do think there's 2 points to mention. One, in the current discussion, I often see that we have excellent experts with a very, very good education, not only in Switzerland, but all across the world, but often they are not encouraged to actually step up and take and join the ranks of leadership. And I would like to encourage you, and I know many of the big companies actually start doing that, to really encourage technical people to step up and join the ranks of leadership, because you need the knowledge to actually manage and guide and steer in the right direction. And those people will also understand why investment in security is not necessarily just a cost factor, but can open new business models and new opportunities, as UBS has impressively shown. I was especially impressed by the mentioning of the bots that actually supported decision-making with the credit. And I think these opportunities need to be taken. And the second one is really, we need, and awareness was raised, but I think it goes further. We also need to educate our workforce that works with technical systems, but are not cybersecurity experts, to actually learn the little aspects of security in their respective field. If you build an IoT device, you need to understand some security aspects of the device you build. If you're a web designer, you need to understand the security of the technologies and the programming language you actually use. And I do see huge potential there to actually balance out and be prepared for the digital future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florian, for these reflections, and again bringing the challenge of reducing lost in translation, and hinting to one element which we have noticed in organization, which is internal digital divide, if you can call it cyber divide, within companies, governments, between decision-making stratas and technical structures, which is an interesting point, which requires quite a bit of capacity building. We are seeing that UBS, that obviously Kaspersky, Microsoft are addressing this challenge very, very well by bringing cybersecurity issues higher to the agenda of CEOs and the leaders of the companies. Now we'll go to Kasper with one question which was posed by our colleague from African Union. And it is, I know, Kasper, you put quite a bit of time, you personally, in capacity building in developing countries. And I know it's very high on Microsoft agenda. And there was a question, how to raise awareness in particular in developing countries and in Africa. What would be your take in addressing all links, including the weakest link in cybersecurity chains?
Well, thanks, Jovan, for, I guess, transmitting that question from somebody else. Listen, before answering that question, I just want to actually refer back to something I think Sabine said earlier on that I think is enormously important, and that is to not indicate that there is a contradiction between security and innovation, and really to fully understand that security is the foundation for the innovation that we are seeing right now. And that goes back to the notion about building trust. Without trust, digitalization will not take place. Without trust, it'll be very difficult for us also as a company to roll out our new technologies and really benefit to the benefit of our customers. So I just want to make that point. I think we have to be very careful not to put in front of us any contradiction in this area. Let me make a couple of remarks in terms of Africa, but I also want to make one remark in terms of Europe, which I think is important. I think the first one is that when you look at how the world is right now, and again, I think the pandemic is really a catalyst for many of the trends or the trajectory we've seen before. It is evident that we're struggling even in very developed countries with making sure that we develop our own safety and security. And if I begin with the European Union, I think what is fantastic about where we are today, and again, trying to be a little bit positive and optimistic, is that we're actually seeing governments, but also international organizations like the European Union really stepping up to the plate, not only with policies, but actually also introducing regulations. And I just want to point to the Network and Information Security Directive, the NIS directive, which is in existence, but is now undergoing a review. And what will happen is actually the European Union, looking after what individual member states are doing and helping increase both reporting on specific incidents, but also making sure you have appropriate standards to increase cybersecurity in individual member states. So I think going back to what Eugene said earlier, we are beginning to see regulation increase in areas in order to defend our critical infrastructure. And I think that's a positive aspect. What I do want to make very clear, which is definitely our view, is that it is so important that we create interfaces between regulations, between government efforts, or in this case, between the European Union and the private sector. Whether you like it or not, we are first responders. We have access to real-time data on where attacks are coming from. We're doing our part to try and defend. And it is so important that we create this linkage between the private sector and the public sector. Now, going back to the digital divide, I think we need to invest more in developing economies that are in many ways, in some ways, even more vulnerable. They need to step up digitalization efforts. But we also think as a company, we have to make sure that we do our part. So one thing we did actually during the Paris Peace Forum was to partner up with the Global Forum on cyber expertise and actually develop a program on capacity building specifically focused on Africa. So we'll have expertise available that can work with stakeholders in Africa, governments, private sector, civil society, in trying to create, I would call sort of a common approach, taking in the different advice that are already in existence and trying to develop ways of also helping developing economies focus on cybersecurity aspects. And I think that's sort of the next frontier that we have to focus on. I think it was very reassuring that the Paris call and the Paris Peace Forum also put additional focus on developing economies, saying that we have to make sure that whether it's the Paris call, that we include more signatories from other parts of the world that has that less focus on that. And I think that's sort of the next step. And again, I would just argue that we have to make sure we do our part also as a private institution. The last thing, and then I'll promise to shut up, Jovan, is just to say I think it is interesting to see what is happening in Europe right now. A lot of focus on values, a lot of focus on rules, but also increased demands to all of us, whether it's European companies or non-European companies, to align fully with where Europe is heading. And I do think the value dimension, defending democracy, defending key institutions, the rule of law, human rights, are fundamental aspects that are sort of the overlay, if you like, of the cybersecurity discussion. And I think for us in the industry, that really requires us to rethink how we're operating, in this case in Europe, and make sure that our technologies are really fit with Europe. It's not Europe that needs to align with the technologies, it's the technologies that need to align with Europe. And I think that's one of the lessons that all of us will have to take forward. And cybersecurity as a foundation is going to be absolutely critical. Thanks.
Thank you, Kasper. Before we move to Jeremy, let me just ask Eugene about one question. The Geneva Dialogue has been very, very practical. And Eugene, on one point, you mentioned gaming and games as a way to raise awareness on cybersecurity and a broader issue. And you, if I'm correct, you mentioned something Monopoly-style game. Can we have some innovative ways for what just Kasper mentioned, huge need for awareness building and capacity development all over the world in all stratas of companies, governments, and reducing that digital divide that exists everywhere. What is in the cooking in Kaspersky when it comes to games on cybersecurity training?
Well, Isha, this is we have a different kind of trainings for cybersecurity, starting from kids in schools and up to the C-level management, and that's the game. It's about 1.5 hours simulation of the enterprise and the cyber attack on the enterprise, and you have budget, you have time, you have options, and it's like a Monopoly game, and it really great thing. As far as I remember, well, we can provide you this game, and we can provide the training for you. So my staff will contact you later after this event, and we will send you this game. No problem.
Great. Thank you, Eugene. Being of generation of playing games from Tetris, starting from Tetris, I'm always excited about computer games, and especially when they can be used for education. Therefore, it will be probably one of the capacity development tracks of Geneva Dialogue after for the next phase. Jeremy, back to you. We had this in our discussion. We had this cyber, let's say, capacity building, awareness building track, and we had the more or less standardization regulation. There were a few questions on the interplay between GDPR, Cloud Act, and cybersecurity. What would be your take on these challenges? And since we are closing gradually the session, what would be your suggestion in this respect? Over to you.
Sure. I guess not wanting to oversimplify the discussion, we have a technical problem called cybersecurity, and all technical problems can be overcome with technical solutions. And the technology perennials like Microsoft, Huawei, and others have proven that to be the case. But I think we need to recognize where we are in the development. And I think Kasper or somebody mentioned earlier on that we were in the Stone Age. We're definitely in a point of transition from the offline world to the digital world. And particularly in the last 12 months or so, last 6 months, we've seen a massive increase in digitalization, which means that there are more bad players who can't work in the offline world in applying their trade, and they're coming into the online world. And then coupled with that, we have the proliferation of connected devices, moving from millions of devices to billions of devices, and that's billions of devices per country, not globally. So the threat is and the opportunities have increased substantially, but it's one of focus. I mean, I used to run telecommunications products for a large carrier, and it always surprised me that actually customers wouldn't pay extra for security until they had an issue, and then they'll pay a lot extra. So if you think who is responsible for developing or who's responsible for their security, then in the online world it's the individual and the companies. But because we're relatively immature, and we have to recognize that we are relatively immature, there aren't the frameworks or the protocols or even the standards in many respects for the players, the vendors, or even the individuals, companies and people in the street, to know what the right thing to do is. So we owe it to ourselves as an industry to nurture those protocol standards, legislation, and the NIST has been mentioned, very good for critical infrastructure, but more work needs to be done on consumer devices. So I would say that we need to spend more time creating the frameworks so that the innovators in the business have a secure environment and a standard to build to. So ultimately, I think it is the responsible for the individual, the company, or the person to manage their own security. If you leave your front door unlocked, then it's your responsibility. The trouble is, we haven't given our people and our companies necessarily the keys or the locks, and that's what we need to do as an industry. If we do that, I think we will see significantly greater adoptions, greater prosperity as a result of the digitalization, and the early adopters will benefit. So I think there is work to be done as an industry to create the locks for the doors so that the individuals know what to do when they leave their homes, in this case, the digital homes.
Thank you, Jeremy, for this lovely metaphor and also highlighting responsibility of companies. Before I ask our panelists for almost tweet style, longer tweet style summary and their suggestion for the follow-up in Geneva Dialogue, I would like to ask Vlada to give us summary of a very, very lively discussion in text chat. What has been going on in text chat? Vlada, over to you.
Thank you, Jovan. Almost a parallel world, but quite connected. A couple of reflections on the challenge of fragmentation of the global internet, things like fragmentation, censorship, disinformation, and then to what extent the fragmentation of cyberspace actually impacts this discussion. Yet there were also comments that, those that are in a way fragmenting can actually be losing the most. There was a very interesting comment by Harry related to standards, where Harry said, when standards are good, people tend to accept them. When you create a really good standard, then it'll have a better chance to become the global standard and become integrated. And Harry gave an example from Indonesia, where the GDPR comes as a good example. Julian reminded us of the Swiss Digital Foreign Policy Strategy and shared the link, so we encourage everyone to take a look. Anastasia mentioned that it could be hard to expect that one critical infrastructure sector should be protecting the others, such as banking sector, to maybe help protecting the others. And finally, Amir mentioned a couple of his views on what is needed in terms of the international cooperation. He mentioned we might need a digital organization, maybe based in Geneva, to set the rules of the game. Particularly private sector could be contributing through the IGF Plus as modus operandi. Amir mentioned that the interplay of governments and private sector is important through tech diplomacy, international instruments, global trust for building measures to digital platforms and so on. And he also suggested that we might need a global declaration on peaceful development oriented and civilian cyberspace that could possibly be a Swiss initiative. And lastly, you have one thumb up for Tetris. Jovan, back to you.
Okay. Therefore, there are still the veterans of digital technology who can remember Tetris. Thank you, Vlada, for this summary. And we are getting back to our panelists. And for this really either comment, but quick and short comment, otherwise I'll become persona non grata of going over the planned time that we have about 4 minutes. Comment or indication how you see this process in the future. We start with Sabine. Sabine, please.
Well, look, first of all, I do think, and I've mentioned that we are a part of a global network of systemically relevant banks. And we obviously, for Switzerland, the financial industry plays a key role. So we are very supportive of what Federal Councillor Maurer has mentioned earlier on in Switzerland's role in really fostering these initiatives with global aspirations, because we do need global standards. We do need public-private partnerships. We do need cross-border cooperation on the area of cyber. So all what has been said and done, as I said, has our full support. If I would close, like sort of really getting back to the initiative when we started and reflecting back to the economic recovery point, I think I would close with saying really the banks have demonstrated, and banks have been benefiting, particularly the large banks, the systemic relevant banks, from a lot of regulatory attention on the cyber prevention. So we could demonstrate through the pandemic that we have been strong partners in really pushing economic recovery. And I can just assure you that cybersecurity and cyber resilience are amongst the top priorities for financial institutions, for UBS, but only by proactive collaboration, as I said, between public sectors and private sectors. But more importantly, it's across borders, sharing information about attacks, exchanging best practices, using the same standards, and continually improving security systems. Only then we will be able together to deter cyber criminals in an effective manner and to continue to best serve our clients, in the end to the benefit of the economy.
Thank you, Sabine, and thank you for offering to make this bridge between financial sector debates and the other, and serving possibly as this boundary spanner between two communities. Eugene, in addition to Monopoly, which I'm eagerly waiting to receive for our training and great impacts on standardization, what is your take? Very short take, and we move on with the other panelists. Over to you.
Yeah, I see there is a very good question about the IoT security. And technically speaking, actually, for some particular devices, it's possible to develop the cybersecurity solution, the antivirus for security cameras or any other kind of the Internet of Things. But it's simply not possible to manage all that. Imagine that at home you have dozens of devices. And you have to manage security, not just for computers or smartphones, but for all the kinds of devices. In your office, there will be hundreds of the things. In your country, there are 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 of different devices. It's simply not possible to manage all that. It could be as complicated as assembling the Rubik cube, and not just standard Rubik cube, but like this, this Rubik cube 11 by 11 by 11. So to manage the IoT security will be as difficult as assembling this stuff. Speaking about the games. So the only solution to develop the IoT based on the secure by design platform and switching from the security concept to the immunity to develop the system which are unhackable. And technically speaking, it's possible, and my company is working on that. What we really need, we need the help of regulators. We need the help of standardization to develop the standards and rules for companies to develop the Internet of Things based on the immunity platform. And I believe this is the future of the cyber age. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. What is the tweet from Jeremy? Concluding tweet.
Very briefly, Johan, you started with neutrality, trust, and inclusivity. So I just have one plea. Don't let global politics get in the way of doing the right thing to drive growth. And those are the values. Neutrality, trust, and inclusivity are genuine values that we need to have at this particular point to get the digital dividend.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy, for this trinity in Aristotelian and French tradition. Kasper, you stay with this trinity or you move to the broader tweet?
Well, thanks for giving me the last word. It's very stressful because I see we're already 2 minutes late. But two quick points. I think one of the questions was sort of on tech diplomacy or digital diplomacy. And I just wanted to make a shout out also to the Swiss Foreign Ministry for actually picking up, I think, some of the work that others have done in making sure you build bridges between the technology industry and governments and civil society, including by having a very strong team in Silicon Valley. I think that's the right way forward, and you know, a lot of support and appreciation for what is being done by the Swiss. In terms of tweets, I'll just leave it at that. I think the next dialogue that you should organize, Jovan, should be on how you can utilize the momentum of the new transatlantic relationship after the Biden administration election. I think there are a lot of opportunities for us to make sure, whether it's on cybersecurity or on digital policy issues, we should really look at how we can bring Europe and the US closer together around a shared set of values that I think will be fundamentally important as we move ahead in the 21st century. Thanks.
Thank you, Kasper. Thank you. We'll have one more tweet by Florian. Florian, tweet from you. Go ahead.
So yes, very short tweet. I think today's dialogue has shown that we all face similar challenges, but come at them from different angles, and that's what makes dialogue so important. And while we are invested to work on all the security issues, I think I can say that we are especially committed to further foster platforms and provide them in Switzerland and ensure these dialogues can happen. And that's also my invitation for many future dialogues to come.
Thank you. I'm still within the tolerance time of 5 minutes, and I will use it to thank first and foremost our panelists, and also great team which has been navigating this process through 15 sessions, led by Jon van Zoon and Jonas Graz from the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Vladimir Radunović and our team from DiploFoundation. And what is really matters, through this process, through 15 sessions, they develop trust. And this is a huge capacity for continuation of this dialogue. They know to whom to talk, they understand each other, and they reduce the lost in translation between diplomatic, business, technical, financial, and other communities. And this is a great capital. I realized that one can have also online breakfast meeting and very effective one. I would like to thank you, our panelists, to thank great participation from participants online, and to invite you to follow up future developments. Now, since we got quite a few requests after we officially close our session, this room will remain open for technical details about Geneva Dialogue, questions and others which will be answered by representatives of Swiss government and DiploFoundation. Have a nice day and keep in touch and stay tuned on the more positive note, as Kasper has been trying to push strongly throughout discussion. The glass is still half full, it's not half empty. Bye-bye.